Hi, Psych 250 students. We were talking about Jim, the super therapist, and a very unhappy ending last time. I'd like to introduce you to a new subject, and it deals with DID. Uh, there are different dissociative disorders, such as dissociative amnesia, a more typical or atypical disorder is dissociative fugue. When you disassociate with oneself, it's a weird phenomenon. Some of you have had the experience where you felt like you were floating outside of your body, for example. You're not connected anymore. This is sort of what happens with dissociative disorder. It's kind of like a partial or total loss of yourself, in some cases of information, as in amnesia. Now, we know from the cartoons, if you get bopped in the head, you lose your memory, and sometimes you get bopped in the head and you regain your memory. But that's the cartoons. That's just brain damage times two. There are different types of amnesia, such as localized or systemized. As I mentioned before, with fugue, you have the possibility of losing memory and then reestablishing a new identity in a new location, not having any memory of perhaps your spouse or your children from the past. Losing track of time, losing parts of your days or weeks or months is typical with some forms of dissociative disorders, which leads me to DID. Now, again, the old name was multiple personality disorder, and you still hear that, but I think the public is starting to catch up. This started in the 1980s. We switched the name to dissociative identity disorder. Having two or more distinct personalities that kind of take over your life. And initially, you're not aware of these other personalities taking over your life. You might get a call. Why haven't you been to work in a week? Why haven't you been to class for a week? And you're like, I don't know. I lost time. Well, what might have happened was someone took over your life and did something different. Now, we've had a number of cases over the years, some of them kind of famous, and one famous case was a case called Sybil, right? And here is a breakdown of all the different personalities that Sybil had. She had 16 distinct personalities. Unfortunately, this case, which a couple of movies have been made on and so forth, and a very high-selling book, most recently has been questioned to see if it was even authentic or not. A book came out recently called Sybil Revealed, questioned if it was fabricated to the therapist, and then when the client confessed to making up stuff, the clinician didn't want it to get out because she had already got a book deal, a movie deal, and so that's unfortunate if that is in fact true, because then it sheds a light, a shadow on any possible real cases. One case I think is true. It's based on a book called When Rabbit Howls by Trudy Chase. Trudy Chase had a number of voices in her head, others, right? She had 92. And Trudy talks about how she literally was on her way to a meeting and suddenly a alter took over and completely did something different. So she wasn't able to attend her business meeting. And you can imagine how disruptive your life is if you're trying to do business. Now, the case study that I want to talk about is somebody by the name of Joey. And let me tell you the case study. Again, the issue is dissociative identity disorder, and it takes place at my former institution where I used to teach full-time, and that was Lansing Community College. And there's my door of an office that I worked at. While working in Lansing Community College, I would often teach multiple classes like I do here, and I would go to my office in between classes. And my office was down a long corridor, and as I'd open the door, sometimes I would find papers jammed underneath my door. Now, I always discourage students from doing that. I'd much rather have them handed to me because you know how papers are. They can get lost very easily. The custodial staff might think it's trash and just throw it away. Who knows what might happen. But this time it was just a little small piece of paper wrapped up. It was some kind of a note. And so when I looked at the paper, it just said, I'm watching you. I'm watching you. There was it wasn't addressed to me. It wasn't signed by anybody. I just thought, that's weird. So I took the paper and I just put it in my drawer. Didn't think too much of it. I thought it could have been addressed to somebody else. I was the only one in the office, but I figured maybe they got the wrong office. A couple of days later, coming back from my classes, open up my door, there's another paper jammed up. It's all rolled up and I unroll it and it says something like, I like you. Uh-oh, okay. All right, do I have a secret admirer? I don't know. Looks like the similar handwriting to the first note. I put it away. Don't think too much of it. Next time I come, and these are happening several days apart from each other. The next time I come, I see a bigger piece of paper and it's rolled up, and I unroll the paper and I find an X-Acto knife. There's one here if I can get it apart here. No, I'll just show it to you. So it's not too sharp. Something like this isn't the exact one, but something like this is wrapped in the paper, and there's no note on the paper whatsoever. And I'm thinking, okay, what does this mean? Now, I'm watching you, I like you, I'm going to exact knife you? Now my spidey senses are starting to go off. I'm wondering, okay, what's really going on here, right? So I asked the psych lab attendants who are right just down the hallway to kind of keep an eye on my office. Not that they have to just monitor it the whole time they're working, but just kind of keep an eye, because I tell them that somebody's sticking stuff under, I don't tell them what, but sticking stuff under my door. I just want to get a sense of who's doing it. So a couple days later, I'm going back to my office and they wave to me and say, oh, we saw somebody. It looked like they were going to put something underneath your door, and then they saw us looking and then they took off. And I said, can you tell me what the person looked like? And they described a female, and by the description of her height and her weight and her general looks and what she was wearing, what her jacket looked like and so forth, I had a feeling I knew who it was. I was suspicious and thought, oh my goodness, it's a former student of mine who used to be in my abnormal psych class. So a couple of days later, campus is not huge. You run into students all the time when you're walking through the building or the campus. I happened to see this student and I said, hi, so-and-so, how you doing? And she didn't look like, oh my God, I'm busted. He knows, right? She just seemed very casual. I'm fine. How are you? That kind of stuff. I said, hey, do you have a couple minutes? I'd love to talk to you about something. She said, sure. She didn't seem, again, squeamish, trying to make an excuse. I can't go, whatever. So we go back to my office and I leave the door open. I open up my desk drawer and I show her the two pieces of paper and I show her the X-Acto knife. And I says, what do you know about these? And again, her expression doesn't change at all. It wasn't like, oh my God, you found those. How did you know? She says, this looks like Joey's writing. And I said, who's Joey? And she says, I'm pretty sure Joey's one of my alters. She goes on to explain that she has been recently diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder, and Joey happens to be the trickster. Joey is a male. He's approximately her age, and he loves to play games. And he knows who I am because she was in my class, and so was Joey, so to speak. She did not meet the criteria that we would normally think of when it comes to DID patients or clients. Normally they have a history of intensive abuse, torture, psychological, sexual trauma done to them. But she, to the best of her knowledge, at least in talking with her mother, didn't have any history like that at all. So she wasn't sure why these alters were part of her, but she fortunately was working on her issue. After that, I never got any more notes. Now, is this a true case of DID? I don't know. But it's the only time in my 19 years as a clinician and now my 30 years as a professor that I ever met somebody that seemed to believe that they were generally diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder. Because it's so infrequent, I think that's what adds to the controversy, right? This notion that is it real? And there are a lot of things that we don't see all the time that are very real. But again, because of cases like Sybil, it's kind of ruined it for the legitimate cases where we believe that they actually were DID individuals, but they've been discounted, right? Some people never even get diagnosed because they're diagnosed with something else, maybe something that one of their alters have. So the next time somebody comes up to you and say, "Hey, you're so and so," and you're like, "I'm sorry, you've mistaken me for somebody else," and then they show a picture of you that looks awfully like you, except for this person has glasses. You know, say, "Wow, that looks like me. Matter of fact, I have that shirt and I have that tie, but it's not me." Well, it could be a case of dissociative disorder, and it could be actually a case of dissociative fugue, right? I call it amnesia with flight. You've lost your memory, you move somewhere else. So I'm not so quick to disregard dissociative disorders. I know that the mind is amazing and can do some amazing things. Some things due to trauma. Now, one of the things that we do for dissociative disorders, for example, DID, is we try to acknowledge that these alters exist, acknowledge there's some loss of memory, and try to fuse together a strong personality and try to reestablish the treatment and try to find out how it got started, right? Because many times people don't know exactly when it started happening. Sometimes they do, and their life started getting very disrupted. It is rare, obviously, but in the movies, they kind of skew data too. They always have somebody who claims to be DID, and at the end of the movie, they're winking, you know, I fooled them, right? I just made up those alters, and that, again, feeds into the fantasy that it's not real whatsoever. I believe it is real. Can I give you some questions on the exam? Ready to go. Of course, there's a question on Joey. I want you to tell me everything you learned about Joey and her diagnosis, or his diagnosis, depending on how you want to look at it. And the other case study, Jim the super therapist. I want you to talk about everything you learned about Jim the super therapist, as well as the diagnosis. I appreciate you tuning in every time and taking notes on these videos, and I hope to see you soon.